Um, the average rent statewide, I mean, should I start over? Yeah. How you want to?
Just go for
All right, so the average rent, statewide, is closing in on, $2,300 a month, and that's for a two-bedroom. And, of course, do any of these numbers sound reasonable to any of you from Telluride, Grant County, or Eagle County? No, no, they'd be like, wow, if I could get something that. And I mean, even in kind of sitting down in the Southwest, you're currently,
way above that.
yeah, kind of way above those numbers. So yeah, so that's kind of the baseline of where we're starting. And I need to hear like own a house that you live in. All right. And do you think this room is representative of the majority of your workforce owning the home they live in? So I think that's a key piece of this conversation, is of we may not have the perspective of exactly how hard it is to get into a house in this state these days. So keep that in mind as we kind of go through this. So, I did a little bit of a poll. I tried to catch every, county in every retag. And so the median sale price as of August 2025 of a single family home is the first column. The second column is the median price of a townhome condo, if that data existed for that county. So that gives you that sense there. And then the third one is the HUD fair market rent. The HUD fair market rent is a lie. So it's actually calculated at the 40th percentile of the market rent. So you actually have to take that HUD number and multiply it by 2.5 to actually get what is probably the market housing rate. How does that jive for those of you who have looking at money near D or what looked at those rent numbers? So I'm in the ballpark. All right, I'm seeing a few nods. So yeah, so it seems like, and I don't know if Sherilyn's on, but we should all move.
You missed her comment.
Yeah, we should all move to Baca County as well. I'm reading on this, but what Sherilyn have to say?
You're welcome to come by and we'll chat.
And like, yeah, I mean, the commute from Springfield to like Telluride, right. And there's a ton of everything, right? So we're starting from pretty affordable down in the southeast corner, to kind of crazy as you start hitting into the mountain communities here, but, so some particularly exciting, housing markets, Madison County is on the low end. Although this little spread here, this is just down the street from our new fire station, and you can pick it up at the offer price of 15,785. It's actually 2 units. And yeah, it's
Get some rental income.
yeah, a brand new rental income. Yeah, they're totally offset that mortgage. It's literally quarter of a mile of the hill, Parkinson, lovely. So yeah. But yeah, here are some particularly challenging numbers. Does the San Hagel jive? They're about 1.2 as the median.
Kind of low,
Yeah,
They get pulled down by the real estate, the West End or the county.
gotcha. Okay.
Tire right now. We can't get it.
All right. Yeah. And I think what we're commonly seeing too, I mean, I think what's evolved, I think from my knowledge of the Summit County system and the Eagle County system, is they're getting, and I don't know if it quite happens as much in Pitkin and probably not so much in Route. Commuters along the I-70 corridor, I mean, I think are a big deal in terms of most of the workforce coming in is not in town. And how it's down in the Southwest these days?
a fair amount of people, well, they end up migrating around a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, but Durango's prices El Paso, a lot of folks have moved towards Memphis. Bayfield's already been kind of sucked up. People here moving to Big Nasty and that.
yeah, sure. Was a good call. Well, Sherilyn's in comment. Oh, so even in Springfield, you have to pay more, darn it. Um, here's the part, because all of you raised your hands and said you actually own a house, and I probably had it for a little while. This is the all transactions house price index. This is one of the data points the Federal Reserve tracks, and publishes. Fed is the Federal Reserve, electronic data system. The Federal Reserve Bank of, St. Louis publishes this. This just gives you a general sense of housing availability in Colorado over time. So essentially this, the inflation adjusted house price was, on this chart set in 1980. So 1980 is the baseline. So everything going up from that is an inflation adjusted price from the 1980 level, and it does look back a little bit, as well. But essentially, here's how much it cost on a relative basis to buy a house in 1980. It was generally similar in 1990, went up probably by double, in 2000, a little more 2010, and then we start seeing this pretty meteoric rise, to 2020. So right now, compared to if you tried to buy a house in 1980, buying a house in 2025 is 8.5 times more expensive, on a relative basis than it was then. So this is really that big deal of what your workforce is facing in terms of housing at this point in time. And there's some other ways to look at it too. Um, this is, an outfit, called the Common Sense Institute. This is called the Homebuyer Misery Index. So this is actually tracks two data points, home prices and mortgage rates, and kind of pushes them together. And they did it on kind of a county by county snapshot, but the trends, and they're all the urban counties mostly, but essentially it's basically that same trend line where it's become, especially in the last probably 5 years, substantially more difficult to hit the affordability mark with housing. So generally, when we're talking about how to afford housing, the rule of thumb is it shouldn't be more than 30% of your gross income. And I think that number, we see it go higher than 30%, probably up to 50% in a lot of cases, but 30 is considered, the guideline, and it's what a lot of mortgage lending is based on as well. And basically at the 30% level for housing, that allows you to use the remaining 70% of your income to be reasonably financially secure. It is a measurement used pretty much across the board when doing this analysis. So how does that play out in Colorado? It turns into the next question. But it starts with, here's what the online places are telling me, and what we found out when we did some workforce analysis with the sustainability, task force last year. So average firefighter salary in the state, $98,000. That's all levels, all types. That probably skews hugely to the metro area, areas as well. Average paramedic salaries, 70 to 110. Average, EMT salaries, and average is not the word to be using here, but the range for EMT salaries is generally in the 50 to 80,000 range. So tell me how close those numbers are or are not.
We're
Close.
within that.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool. Well, what's that?
the high end's a little hopeful.
In terms of the EMTs, the paramedics, or?
Yes.
Yes.
So, I mean, although keep that in mind, right, so we're kind of do a little analysis on this here, so. The high end is hopeful, so that means, well, let's do some math. And this math is actually pretty easily done. Actually, Zillow's got a calculator for this. There are calculators all over the web for kind of how much house or how much apartment can I afford. So these are not hard things to actually find things to calculate for you. But so if we go with the average rent and the 30% number, that yields 91,360 for the income needed to afford the average rent statewide, and about 88,000 to afford the average rent in Denver. Is my statement correct that you may have EMTs in your workforce that are not making those numbers, so they're probably gonna wind up over the 30% number? Cool, that's renting. Well, let's do a buy example for that median statewide house. So 554,000. We'll just go ahead and assume you've got $108,000 to plop down on that, just lay around. And then we'll add a 30-year mortgage at 6.26, which was the rate as of Monday. And then that'll yield a principal and interest amount of 2,736. We'll go ahead and add other 600 bucks or so for taxes and insurance, and that'll get us to the low price of $39,768 a year to buy that median priced house, or 3,314 a month. So cool. For that, you only need 132,560 to make that number work. Do you see $132,000 on that slide anywhere? Well, cool. Just find somebody else to buy the house with, and we can cut that in half for you. That gets down to 65. So at least that gets you started potentially. But basically, on one income, you're not going to pull that off at most of our pay rates. Tim Dienst.
So, and the thing that kind of cracks me up a little bit when you think about your insurance of 570.
Yeah, that's probably interesting. On
Yeah,
a calculator number that
You know, areas with trees or even grass, now those homeowners insurance is going up significantly.
Yeah.
Or getting cut off.
Yeah, I think all that's true. So, I think the real take home here as we move forward though is, it's really hard for the people who work for you today, especially if they're not already, in, a stable housing situation. It's hard to get in the door. And that will probably continue to be the case, in Colorado for quite some time, not just in our crazy mountain towns where everything is a ridiculous price, but I think we're starting to see that all the way up and down the urban corridor, and in a lot of other places as well. How to play out for those of you kind of eastern plains here? How does it play with you guys?
We're a little bit lower, but not much. I mean, these days we get a quick surrender for 300,000, 350.
And I'm far east, like by Kansas.
Right.
And 5 years ago, these numbers have been significantly different, but today, $500,000 house is about what they're costing in Cheyenne Wells is not far below that as well.
Okay.
And our income is substantially, like, I could probably count two hands the amount of people beyond the small percentage that are actually making anywhere close to that top of the first.
Gotcha. And how does it play through in the metro area? I mean, is it challenging in the urban corridor as well? So all right, well, cool. Great situation we're all in.
Don't forget about those, the dues, if you have a homeowners association.
You're right, hundreds, many hundreds. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a big challenge out there. It's probably not going away. There's definitely value to us having our employees near where we're providing emergency services. That is becoming harder and harder over time, and that's probably not gonna go away. So we should probably ask the question. What are we gonna do about it? Does anybody know this scene from How to Train Your Dragon? That's Astrid and Hiccup. And they're having a conversation about the dragon toothless. Anybody, you know what the next line is?
My daughter is here.
The next line is, probably something stupid. To which Astrid replies, "You've already done that." To which Hiccup replies, "Then I'll do something crazy." But those are the next few lines. I didn't do the video clip. My apologies. I never trust the technology for that. But anyway, yeah, because the video clips never really do. Yeah, they always don't work in this situation. But anyhow, all right. So speaking of the situation, so I think the first step for any of us is what actual situation are we in? And I need to throw out kind of some credit here. A couple 3 years ago, at the Special District Association conference, the Eagle River Water and Sanitation District, they had a presentation on kind of how they've been approaching housing really since the turn of the century. So let me just like explain a little bit about what they were telling us in terms of the water and sewer thing. So all of us think emergency services are important, right? It's a critical public safety services. We're heroes, flashing lights, the whole 9 yards. So that's all true. However, there's a little handle on the side of the commode, and if you hit that, you expect the stuff to go away. And if that doesn't happen, that's kind of a civilization ending event, and that's what water and sanitation districts do for a living. So their workforce can't work a 4896 and can't be 3 and 4 hours away on a commute. They've got to be there to deal with the pipe, to deal with the valve, to deal with the equipment, to make sure that the system is working. So they probably wound up in the how do we house people near our facilities a lot sooner than we ever have in our world, where we can tolerate a lot more of the commuting piece. So they've probably been at it a little longer than us. And so a lot of the things I'm going to tell you about are stuff that they have been working on for years as well. So anyhow, but anyway, in terms of knowing the situation, so housing costs in your area, there is, let's see if I can change this up real quick. Websites that show you kind of median house prices in the area. This one's not going to be great to me, so we'll skip over that for a minute. I'll get back into some. Yeah, so now what the median house price is in your jurisdiction, I showed you a few samples. Those slice and dice in a bunch of ways. They slice by zip code, they slice by city, they slice by metropolitan area, and they slice by county. So there's a bunch of ways to look at that. Most of the state realtor associations, local realtor associations now do have some level of data availability that's publicly facing. And a lot of the big real estate websites like Zillow and such can tell you about what the prices are in your area. Do that math. do that 30% math and figure out in terms of mortgage amounts and rents, how much of your workforce could qualify, how would that work? Understand the availability picture in your area, because in a lot of cases, I know in our area, I suspect it's the same in the other mountain towns, there's just not that much out there to even rent. So there's a big squeeze there. Understand how many of your workforce are commuters is also a big deal. And I see Tim's hand in the back of the room.
You know, based on your comment, comment on your slide, I wonder what the cost per flush is and the revenue per flush is. Which does separate us a little bit from them. Generally speaking, if you don't pay the cost of the flush, then you don't get the flush. The other thing that stands out to me is what are your shift schedules? More and more, we're going to longer shifts with longer time off, right? So we're going 48, 96, we're doing whatever. It wasn't that long ago in the industry, we were having serious conversations about, are our shifts too long? Is the fatigue factor based on that too extreme? And now we're not even talking about that anymore.
I really like where you're taking me, so hold that thought for just a minute, because yes, I think there's a double-edged sword here in terms of the shift length that piece that I'll hit on in just a second. So thanks for taking me there. I'm not going to delve into revenue per plus.
Yeah, what are the contractual on flushes?
I'm sorry, well, that's the water and sewer question that I'm gonna be bad at.
How much are they taking out for?
Yeah, those guys, I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? Because a lot of those water and sanitation districts, if they're not municipal, they have some level of property tax base that helps them. They generally do tap fees that deal with their capital infrastructure, and then they generally deal with ongoing service fees to keep everything maintained. So I think those are their three main sources to answer your probably not serious question. So thanks, Dave. But anyhow, and then the last thing is, and I think this has come up a lot with us in our organization, is really what kind of housing do we need? So I have like two situations. I've either got people who live in town who have housing, who've been in town for a long time. And I don't worry so much about them. And then I've got people I'm trying to hire from the outside. And I'm a small, low call volume operation. So I'm generally trying to hire people that are experienced, and we're generally trying to hire people who are kind of mid-career. And that means I'm not getting somebody I can put in a studio apartment. I'm getting somebody who's probably married, might have kids, certainly had a couple of cars, probably dogs, probably some toys. So, I mean, we are kind of in the 2 and 3 bedroom realm when we think about how to house our employees, whereas others might have the 20-something just starting in emergency services who might do just fine in 1-bedroom apartment kind of setup. So know kind of where you are in that space overall. All right, so here is the easiest way to solve your problem. We've already kind of talked about it. All you have to do is get their salaries up to the point where they could afford the stuff. So Colorado statewide, 133,000 gets you into the state median priced house. And then if you assume a dual income, it's actually a much more reasonable number at the $66,000 a year, like half that number, right? So, and that Colorado Springs townhouse is even easier to get into, but then you wind up at some other places. So even in the fancier suburbs of the metro area, you're looking at $170,000 on single income. Basically a super easy number for us to make in terms of a salary, right? You know, I could do it. We would have like one shift all the time, but I mean, and then it gets even more ridiculous as you head into the Vail numbers and the Aspen Pickens County numbers. So Veronica, tell me, as I glossed over Vail, tell us more.
Well, the water district, I don't know if people know exactly what they do for their housing. they purchased, at least 100 units or built about 100 units that they rent to their employees at a reduced rate. They also give every single person a housing stipend every single month of almost 500.
Cool.
Well, cool for some industries, the thing is you have people that start to consider their choice of career and some people change.
Yeah, and I mean, it seemed to me when they were kind of talking at the SDA conference, they kind of do a lot of, they do some more rentals, and have a lot of units, they have a down payment assistance program, and they also have a stipend program. Available to them, and all of those might be slides coming up, so thanks for the lead in. But first, let's go to Tim, and his comment here. So one of the ways to deal with the housing thing is to make commuting a viable option. And I think a lot of us have, I don't know how much we've actually thought about it, as we've done it. But the 4896 shift is pretty amazing for commuting purposes, right? That gets you in the car back and forth 5 times a month, and that's a pretty low intensity number of times in a 30-day period to actually do that commute. I know our organization, when I got there, we were doing a 6 a.m. start, and that was crazy for people driving in from far away. They were getting on the road at 2, 3, and 4 in the morning, before the snowplows got out. And so our shift changes now are 8 in the morning in order to better facilitate that. A few places, I think the South Park English District, Parkland is still during the evening. Start times to actually facilitate meetings, so basically come to work at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, check the truck, have dinner, run calls, go to bed, wake up, we'll run through that cycle. So I think there are those options as well. Having extra space in your facilities, so if there is going to be a weather event, like commuters could come in early and stay overnight ahead of the shift, is certainly a viable option as well. We certainly allow for a lot of shift trades and early relief if people need to actually go somewhere, or do some things. And you have to kind of resign yourself to, there are going to be days when people are not going to be able to make it, or are going to show up late for conditions beyond their control. And if your approach to that is, how dare you show up to work a minute late, it's time to write you up, that may not, that person will look for the job closer to where they live pretty quickly, is probably the downside of that. And I mean, I think in our case, and in a lot of our cases, we have stations, have people change their oil in the building, or make sure their tires are wearing them, and all that sort of stuff, making that available, I think, is the next feature. So that's what I have on commuting and the double-edged sword of the longer shifts. Tim, was there anything else you wanted to throw in on that topic, or?
I just wanted to once again reemphasize that it wasn't, well, I guess it was long ago, it was pre-COVID. But the industry as a whole was advocating for shorter shifts.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of us that were complaining at that point of, well, if we went to 12-hour shifts with that 4 on, 3 out, 3 on, 4 out, you have to have more people cover all the shifts, hours. And how are we gonna afford that? And so, and the push for that was safety primarily. Trying to mitigate fatigue, and now we're going to these 4896s, or I mean, I've heard some services doing 72-hour shifts at a time. How can that be safe? How do we effectively mitigate?
Yeah, and I think that's true, right? And in our case, I mean, everybody's got their own kind of call volume situation, and James, I did see your hand. Everybody's got their own situation. Our call volume is about 800 a year, so we're talking maybe 3 calls a day. So a 4896 is not a big deal for us. I think that's very different if you're a 10, 20, 30,000 call a year operation, and how that plays through. So I think you have to kind of keep that in mind. But to the extent they can be tolerated, and you have a lot of commuters, it's a good option for that, but there is a point where it crosses over and you're like, I can't have this many people running calls for this long. Or this many calls for this long, so yeah, thanks, James.
And I think we all kind of intuitively know this, but, the other cost is the, you know. Decision fatigue that comes in from the longer shifts and things like that, but the longer commutes, the longer the shift, it's to promote people to move further away, which means. We're sending them home fatigued, right, and they're driving back and forth
Yeah.
fatigued. And while it may not cause the accident, it reduces their ability to respond when another driver, I say, okay, we've seen in the state of Colorado that I know of. Personally, at least 2 accidents in the last few years that are due to fatalities for first responders, either headed to or from shift. And I can't, and they were both commuting long distances, and I can't help but think that that is a contributing factor.
Yeah.
We're increasing the exposure of our staff driving back and forth.
Yeah, I think all that's true, so I think. If you know that you have this workforce, do the best you can to accommodate it, I think you're absolutely correct. That there are definitely a bunch of downsides here that you have to consider. And I think a lot of places in the state are often.
Well, just a word of the thought for folks considering start time changes, that was a big project for us in the last year. One of the fire departments up on the northern 25 corridor, we're starting to 7 p.m. start time, and impressively, after a year, 100% satisfaction on that 7 p.m. start time. Well, that's a number that as an administrator, well, if I got it, makes everybody happy. I better see if I can do that. But upon looking into it, at least for our service, and I would imagine for many other rural resort communities, we found that if we would have gone to 7 p.m. start time, that we would have gone up like 400% and getting off late.
Yeah,
Because of IFTs and because of
Yeah.
transfers, yes, clinic dump at the end of the day. City traffic, and then we've estimated that through the mountain corridor, almost nobody would get to work on time, or they'd have to leave 3, 4, 5 hours sooner than they normally.
right,
That's right.
yeah. Yeah, no, I
So
think,
where did you settle on time? Sorry,
Go ahead.
John.
We ended up, what we found from the data was that when you took our call volume data, when you took the Go I-70 data and merged them together, we had a window where we could start at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. So we did 8 because we thought it was 5 a.m. start.
cool. Yeah, no, I think all that's great conversation, and that's the conversations you have to have if you wind up in this boat. Of the commuters, so yeah, excellent stuff. It is, however, one of the cheaper options. On the list of things that you could do. Housing stipend, we've already kind of touched on that a bit, is generally a flat amount added either on a monthly basis or on a by pay period basis to help offset housing costs. Our organization does that. We give folks who aren't in our employee housing options $200 extra a paycheck who live in our fire district. We give them $150 more if they live in a county, and we give them $100 if they live anywhere else. So to offset kind of some of those commuting costs and things. This is taxable income. There are a couple ways it can be handled. Generally, I'm not seeing a lot of organizations paying enough to cover all of the housing expenses. So it's usually just a portion. But it could be tied in your area to actual housing costs or just some portion thereof. This is actually a pretty progressive way to do it, just in terms of it's of more value to your lower paid employees than it is to your higher paid employees as a flat amount. So I think I like it for that reason. It's got a couple interesting twists and turns. So if it's for your regular everyday housing, it is taxable. So it's not like, a housing stipend if you're like a traveling nurse, where that would not be taxable, because you're actually getting housing somewhere you don't normally live. That's when it's not taxable usually. Oh, by the way, that's special. But it also has an FLSA impact based on how you do it. So in our case, it is a flat amount and it is not tied to anything other than a flat amount tied to your check. So what that means is I don't have to wrap it into the overtime rate calculation. But what that also means is I have to pay it even if you don't work an hour in that pay period, because as soon as you tie it to any productivity, it becomes part of the overtime calculation. So. Housing stipend questions. Does anybody else have a housing stipend other than us? And Eagle River Water and Sanitation District, as we just found out. I think it's been pretty well received by our workforce. Overall, I think they appreciate the extra $400 a month. It comes to like $425 a month. We'll run a bi-weekly pay period thing. So I think we're working out pretty well. All right, I know time is getting a little tight here, so option 2 after that is go find apartments out there, get leases on them as the employer, and then lease them back to employees. This is a little complicated because you have to find these places, you have to negotiate with the employer or with the landlord, then you have to have a sub agreement to sublease these to your employees. But this is probably the easiest way to get into the housing business as an employer. And it's also how I started my career in Colorado, and we're about to hire a new guy we're kind of doing the same deal with, where it's like, here's a place that you can rent it for when I joined Summit County, I could rent it for up to 6 months until I found a place. And is there a question there? Is there a way to make employees have to qualify for a second need base? Yeah, I mean, those can be structured any way you want. I think in our case, we found it was best to do it as a blanket approach, but there are certainly ways to slice and dice it. I think there's implications if you don't give it to certain people. You should probably articulate what those reasons are, or
For second part.
yeah, is probably your biggest question, but there's no there's no restrictions. Otherwise, then you have to deal with the fallout and you have to pay them correctly if you pay them. So any questions on the master lease approach?
I just have a comment. I think,
Sure.
it depends on who your attorney is, but you might ask about. If you're offering a subsidized rent, it may be a taxable event for the difference between the market rate and the subsidized rate.
That is true, and let's see, do I have that on the next one? Not quite, but in terms of the master leasing or the just having like employer owned apartments, yes, we are very particular to charge at least the fair market rent to our employees, and that eliminates tax consequence as far as we can tell. But yes, if you start subsidizing past the fair market rent, then I think there is probably a tax consequence as well. James?
I probably have to consult a tax attorney, but maybe you know this already. If
That sounds like a dangerous lead-in, just for the record.
if they are on call
Uh,
on the time that they're residing in that if they're on call during that time, then would they then have to pay taxes on it because they're residing there and they're actually performing a function?
I love how you guys are kind of anticipating like my next slides, like so thank you for that. Yeah, I think if you're having them do work for you, you can run that rent down to 0. I think this is the context where we primarily see this. This is Snowmass Village Station 45. There's a half a dozen apartments on the back side of this building. 1-bedroom units. And yeah, so if the reasons to actually build them into buildings, and I understand my Telluride friends have done some of this. We have not. If you have a piece of land and you're building something anyway, build some apartments to do it, makes sense. It does give you economy of scale, and yes, if they're doing something for you, then it can be up to free. So I can go all over Austin. Is it still happening in the fire districts in Grand County where they've got the live-ins who do the work in the apartments, either in the station or behind the station? Yeah, so I gotta be on call so many nights, I gotta check the stuff, I gotta do the things. That's where you can run the rent down to free. It tends to be attractive to the single folks and the college student types. And I think I even had this conversation just before we started with Telluride, right, where you put your volunteers in the station until you stop having as many volunteers, and then all of a sudden you had all the accommodation that you needed in the building, and just to a 24/7 workforce. And so I think it facilitates that as well. So if it's possible to plan on that, that's great. But keep in mind, that means you're at work all the time. So I can tell you, our workforce tells me they do not want to live where they work. That's not the same answer everywhere, but and also it's awkward being your employee's landlord as well. So there's downsides to all these, right?
And we're having to live next to your headquarters.
Yeah, all that's a real thing. These are some apartments in Steamboat Springs. This is the Creeks End project. 42 apartments, probably not unlike what the Eagle River Water and Sanitation District is doing. These were owned, built, and developed by the University of Colorado Health System for employees of the Yampa Valley Hospital, Steamboat Springs. This was a project that the health system took on and built, and it allows them to keep their hospital staffed. The reason to have your own is you only have to lease one time. There's no landlord, then you employee, it's just you and the employee. These of course come with costs, but the next thing is I have an asset on the book here now, right? So this is not gonna lose value. And I could rent these out for income if I could fill them. And if I need to sell it, I've got a books that's probably worth millions of dollars. The problem is you have to go in with millions of dollars to get this. So that's often not let's just do that next week kind of a thing. So, and at some point, it does make more sense to build the housing than it does to pay the employees $350 or $700,000 a year. You can start building apartments for, hundreds of thousands or a few million, right? So. Down payment assistance programs are also pretty popular. We work with this outfit called Winter Development Fund. There are so many ways to start these. They even gave us a menu of like 20 different options, and we're like, well, what do you like and how do you want to do it? We currently do an equity share option. So if the value of your house goes up like 10% over the course of the loan, then the district gets 10% of the proceeds at the end instead of interest. And then there are just common standard loans where a small interest payment comes in every month. It's a second mortgage kind of thing. Anybody else doing these? Veronica?
To do the forgivable loan,
Loan, and how long does that take?
10 years,
10 years, and then there's no payback after that?
it's 50,000.
Nice, okay. Yeah, ours is 50,000 out of the fire district up to 100 in the fire district. And again, it's an asset on the books, right? Because that's a loan that you're getting paid back and making interest on. So it's an accounting adventure to some extent, but it's not like that. The money just evaporates, it stays on the books. Of course, if it's a forgivable loan, it does change after a certain point of time, but that's after you've housed an employee for 10 years. So how many people are in that program?
We have 5 people, and one of them is, she built an ADU that she makes available to employees. Actually, I think it might be up there now, but it's a certain percentage was allocated.
Cool. There are plenty of partnership opportunities, especially in the mountain communities. There are a lot of housing authorities and municipalities who are in the housing game. There's also a lot of loan programs to build housing through the Department of Local Affairs. I'm just kind of running short on time, but just be aware they're out there and you may be better off partnering. Than you are trying to do it yourself, because that's often a path of least resistance. As well. And then really the final option is the for sale employee housing. We're about to do this at some scale. We've done one of those so far. It's my house. And that's basically if you have a piece of land, you can make it available to the employee and tell them to build on it and good luck to you. And in my case, that's what happened with me. And that means, I have a deed restriction on my property, and it's got, the fire district has a guaranteed buyback price. They're based on a 3% annual appreciation piece, and I have to make it available for sale if I no longer work for it then. So that's the build your own piece. There's also the build it and sell it to them piece that works very similar to any of the other for sale programs that a lot of the housing authorities offer, which basically comes with, the good news is you're coming in at a really below market price. The bad news is you're not gonna make a killing when you sell it. And that's a pretty common mountain model. So yeah, these are actually development, but this is Meeting West in Buena Vista. They do a lot of modular stuff out there. So, oh, and by the way, if you're gonna make a sweetheart deal with your CEO to have a place to live, you should always know that it will wind up in the newspaper. And so make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are. Alrighty, so I'm kind of gonna stop there. I kind of told you a lot about what we do, but I mean, kind of our approach is it's expensive. We do a bunch of things. I told you who my workforce is. I do have a bunch of commuters as well. This is my problem. I could not show you this. This unit is still available. This is a trailer home in Crested Butte, Colorado. I do have the MLS listing on it if anybody's actually interested. It's cute.
And how much is the lot rate for this?
I think that one's got its lot. Yeah, I think all of those are on their own lot, so you'll hit the land. So, yeah, so it's not as bad as you think. See, I'm already thinking about so, and I have a bunch of stuff on kind of how we survey on workforce, on what kind of stuff they're looking for in housing. So I think that's a key piece of understanding your workforce as well. And then there's this whole piece around, so we now have 4 rental units, 2 master lease units. We are renting them at the fair market rent. We are doing the housing stipend. We don't include that housing stipend in the overtime calculation because they will get it regardless of if they work an hour during the pay period or not. We do offer down payment assistance up to 150 miles of the fire district. It's a higher amount if you're in the fire district. And then of course, if you start doing that, you have to start putting rules on it, like this is not for you to buy your rental property. This is for your primary residence, so have to apply a bunch of rules there. We have a fixed rate and an equity share option on our down payment assistance program. And we currently own 3 vacant lots that we are hoping to do more for sale employee housing from. So, and then just in terms of some of the things we have learned as an organization, sometimes I got units, sometimes I don't. I feel bad when they're not full, and then if I try to put somebody in them that's not one of us, suddenly we need 3 of them. That's just the way the game is played. expected. We had one for a while that was open and available for short-term people who were like helping them teach stuff and do that kind of thing, or full-time. Shifts, that was great, so needed for primary reasons. Use, we are in the process of redoing our leasing arrangements. There's been a lot of changes in Colorado housing law lately that we're trying to keep up with. Property management is a pain if that's a business you're in. Yes, people will try to game the down payment assistance piece, so keep an eye out for that. If you're paying that kind of prices, you know, it's fun to build stuff. Because it's always more expensive than you think. And that's what I like. So just other thoughts from those of you out here seeing the options and doing the steps, anything else we should talk about? We got 3-4 minutes.
We do fuel cards, Shell fuel
Oh,
cards,
nice.
and then they're refillable, so I can just sit down and add money to them. So, you know, $25 each trip that like a part-time employee takes up. And then pay the full-time staff, depending on if they live in the county or live out of the counties.
Okay.
How much, you know,
Is that income or OpEx?
what's that?
Is that income or is that operating?
No, it operating.
All right. James.
Just one final, so. With a lot of those, it sounds like, a lot of the, benefits you get from owning a home, with the exception of the down payment assistance squads. The employee loses out on the benefits of owning a home, and I think about increasing like, financial literacy for I mean, that's probably one of the areas that a lot of our folks do struggle with is financial literacy. And so my question is, other than the down payment assistance, are there other programs that allow that allow the employee to get some of the benefit of owning a home? And creating that long-term, wealth growth for them. Because it seems like encouraging the rental or encouraging the other options takes away some of the benefit that comes from.
Yeah, I think it does, and it doesn't. I mean, there's a bunch of ways to look at the benefits of home ownership, as you described, right? So if I can get them into a rental, that I'm subsidizing, or if I can give them a housing stipend to help subsidize the rental they're in. I think that does allow for that opportunity to save money and get closer to the home ownership opportunity. So I think there's a little bit of that that's intended to go on in the background. I think the deed restricted home ownership is also not as bad of a deal as my employees tell me it is, because I mean, I lived in one in Breckenridge from the housing authority perspective, right? And it's exactly that deal, right? I'm getting in cheaper.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna make bank, I'm gonna make 3% a year. And that's not chump change. It brings that property back into the fold when they leave and they don't lose money on the deal. So it's got some of the benefits of homeownership, but it doesn't have the winning the mountain town lottery benefit of home ownership. So yeah, that's where I would take you on that.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool, all right, thanks.